Hi everyone. I think we'll get started. So before we start, I just wanted to kind of introduce myself and introduce the team. So I'm Dr. Rebecca Shellock, and I'm the social science specialist working for the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership, and I work at the Centre for Sustainable Development Reform at the University of New South Wales. And I want to welcome you today to today's session. So today's session is an introduction to ocean accounts, which is delivered by the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership and UNSW. So this training session was originally scheduled and developed for the Social Accounts Working Group, but the session was kind of designed to bring everyone up to speed on fundamental accounting principles, and we thought that'd be particularly valuable for the Social Accounts Working Group because they'll be helping with the development of the technical guidance for ocean accounts, and we'll be doing that technical guidance this year and next year. And the Social Accounts Working Group will be helping us contribute to the writing and reviewing of the circular on social accounts. But we had so much interest, so there was a lot of demand and growing interest in ocean accounts. So we actually opened up this session to everyone. So welcome to all participants today. Thanks for joining. And I'm thrilled to introduce my amazing colleague, Maria Granade Alarcon Blazquez, who will be leading today's session. And Maria is an environmental economist specialising in environmental systems analysis. She's got lots of experience with ecosystem services, natural capital accounting, valuation. And I don't know the exact number, but Maria's delivered so many of these training courses. She's delivered so many courses on introducing ocean accounts to everyone. And she's done this across the globe, and she's brought that wealth of experience to participants worldwide. She's also the focal point for ocean accounts work in Belize. And although she sounds very busy already, she's also doing her PhD as well. So just to say thank you to Maria for leading the session today and for sharing her expertise with all of us. So in terms of the session today, you'll be given an overview of the system of environmental economic accounts. You'll also be introduced to ocean accounts principles and applications. And there'll be a session at the end where you can ask Maria all the questions you want to around ocean accounts. There'll be a Q&A session at the end. So in terms of how we'll run things today, it will run for 1.5 hours. So Maria will be giving us a presentation kind of for 1 hour. And then there'll be a 30-minute session at the end where you can ask her questions. And just to note, we're running 2 identical sessions this week to accommodate different time zones. So today we're running it in the Pacific time zone, and tomorrow we'll be delivering it in the Atlantic time zone. But both the sessions cover the same content, so you only need to attend one of them. We're running the session today as a webinar style meeting, so all participants at the moment are muted to ensure clear audio quality. But if you have any questions throughout the session, please do post them in the chat, and we encourage you to ask questions that come to mind rather than waiting until the end. And I'll be making sure to monitor the chat, and we'll try and address the questions immediately or note them down for the Q&A session at the end. And just to note that this session is being recorded, and we'll be aiming to share the recording link with everyone within the next 2 weeks. But after the session, if you have any questions, just reach out to myself or Maria. And just also before we start, this is not the end in terms of learning opportunities on ocean accounts. This year and next year, GOAP will be releasing its ocean accounting online education series. So we'll be kind of hosting a series around ocean accounts on Google Classroom. And there will be 20 to 30-minute modules designed as fundamental kind of building blocks for ocean account practitioners. So those will be released in October, and they'll kind of have core modules, but will be released first in October, and then there'll be other kind of topics related to ocean accounts, asset valuation, economic assessment, marine spatial planning. Those kind of aspects will be released later on. But yeah, just to now hand over to Maria and thank her again. Thank you for the session today.
Thank you, Becca, and thank you for that amazing introduction. I will try my best to explain what the ocean accounts are. And just as Becca was mentioning, this is an introduction training. There is a lot around these frameworks, and I just try to simplified a little bit, but also we will be going through some key concepts and the key standards that are included in the ocean accounts. And hopefully by the end of the session, you will have a better understanding on the fundamental principles of ocean accounts, have more familiarity with these key concepts that are, again, key for national accounts, but also what are things like natural capital or ecosystem services, and also have a better understanding on these key international standards that are followed by the ocean accounts, and better comprehend the types and components of the ocean accounts. So first, I just want to give a little intro to who we are. So we are coming from the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership Secretariat. So we are based at the University of New South Wales, but the GOAP is going beyond the university. So the co-chairs of the partnership are the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Fisheries of the Republic of Indonesia, and also the Charles Darwin Foundation in Galapagos. And the main vision of the partnership is to accelerate transition towards sustainable ocean development, and that is aligned with international frameworks such as the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, or the Global Biodiversity Framework through the accounts. And the idea is to do this, we facilitate collaboration, knowledge production, and basically like sharing knowledge in between everyone that is part of the partnership, but also beyond. So at the moment, there are around, I think, 44 members of GOAP, and we also have different pilots supported around the world. This is just like a little overview of where we are either working or where there are some of the members of GOAP. And the idea is to really have like global representation, since we know that the more knowledge it can be shared, the more best practices can be shared, and also it really helps with the implementation progress. So just to give a little bit more of context, the main idea is to go beyond GDP. So we really want to start developing that holistic view of progress. So we really intend to go beyond what is included in conventional national accounts that really focus on the economic production. So start including and considering things like natural capital, since any development in country depends on things like natural capital, but also recognizing social equity and cultural values that are also key and really important for any economy, society, and also to keep progressing in a sustainable way. And we will be talking about all of these and these concepts like natural capital, what they mean through the training today. And just before I go with more detail, I just want to basically highlight what Becca was saying before. Please feel free to make any questions or suggestions in the chat. Also, if I'm going too fast or something is not really well understood, feel free to say in the chat so I can also explain a little bit better. So basically, we have been talking about sustainable development progress through the accounts, and the key around all of these is that informed decisions need data. So data is really key to have make any decisions, since we believe that you can only manage what you see, so what you are measuring, and we need indicators to be really useful and impactful. So we know that we have, or we are facing more and more international commitments, such as the NDCs, GBA, and SDGs, and countries are committed to these international treaties or agreements. So that really influences as well any national legislation and policies in country. And normally when there is this type of policy and legislation, we also have like countries define goals or targets to measure that they are having any progress towards that policies or legislation. So then normally some frameworks are implemented in country. This could be marine spatial planning, marine protected areas, or blue economy strategies. So what we need is something to measure impact and progress towards these goals. So the accounts really help organizing and being the data foundation that can be used for building those key indicators that are needed to measure that progress towards those targets and the impacts that that implementation frameworks are having. But also it informs back to those implementation frameworks. So it really helps in the policy cycle, also in the sense of measuring policy effectiveness and measuring progress. So again, accounting, what it does is measure, and it measures actions. And to measure and manage progress, we need common definitions and classifications. We need to report in a consistent way, spatially and across time. And we need the ability to report in specific periods. And these three concepts are encapsulated in this type of standard that we are going to be talking about today. So at the moment, most of the national accounts that are existing in countries, they provide a lot of information following these three points that we were mentioning before, following common definitions. They compare across time and in a period of time, but they normally provide information related to economic measurements. So like, for example, employment, production, or consumption. It captures market transactions, and it informs indicators such as the GDP that are normally used for measuring progress, like economic growth. But what they don't do at the moment, it is showing, for example, ecosystem depletion, livelihood vulnerability, quality and resilience of the jobs that keep running the economy. They don't reflect non-market use or cultural values, and they also don't show local realities at the moment. And as we were mentioning at the beginning, you cannot manage what you are not measuring. So then what it happens is that we are failing in creating those impactful indicators that are needed to really start considering all of those things at a national level. So what accounts or the ocean accounts does is bringing together all of that information and going beyond the economic side of things. So they are integrated records of regularly compiled and comparable data concerning not only the economic activities, but also environmental conditions and social conditions, such as where and how healthy are our mangroves, but also how many people are getting their food from those healthy mangroves. So this can be related to other more familiar words that have been used until now, like, for example, produce capital, natural capital, or human capital. And we will keep encapsulating these concepts and how accounts do this in the following slides. So as we were saying, accounts are based on or aligned international standards. So we have the system of national accounts that is it was adopted in 1958, and this one is the system or like the framework that is being used for account for the economic side of things. This one is implemented in almost every country in the world to follow the economic growth of the country. And then during the last decades, another two frameworks have been adopted. One that is called the System of Environmental Economic Accounting Central Framework that was adopted in 2012, and the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, Ecosystem Accounting in 2021. And these are being more and more applied or followed by different countries during the last decades. And I'm going to keep explaining which these are later on in the slides. But I also want to mention that there is a great global momentum around ocean accounts. So they have been mentioned in key, for example, like frameworks like the Global Biodiversity Framework, but also in the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy. And it also helps in the reporting of SDGs, like the SDG 14 and 17. So why do we need standard-based approaches? So I want to come back to a concept that we were mentioning before, that is natural capital. And what is natural capital? So this is a concept that has been being developed, more and more developed during the last decades and century, I would say, that it brings the idea of going beyond economics or the economic focus, and it really encapsulates that the stock of, sorry, it really start bringing environment as another capital, let's say. So then we can start accounting for the natural resources and the services or goods. So the contributions that nature bring to society, both to the economic activities, but also to human activities. However, we can see that there have been many different approaches on how to account for it. So how do we do natural capital accounting in general? We have seen some frameworks coming from the private sectors, others coming more from academia, and also some national approaches. But we need some international standard, since when we see, for example, a number or a monetary value attached to natural resources, we really need to understand how we have come up with that number. So what an international standard helps taking into account or break down is to have the logical steps that are needed to, or you need to follow, so we can get that number, and like that anyone else can either replicate that logical steps to come up with similar numbers, but also it helps tracking this and makes everything more transparent. So then we can see how we have come up with this final information. So then we can say that why we need these standards are mainly to have consistent and organized data. So it really helps breaking the silos that many times happens when you have different type of data, like environmental, economic, and social. It also enables the comparison and the link in between different domains and dimensions that until now they have been looked separately. And it also improves this transparency and trackability. So again, it really helps seeing a holistic view, as we were saying at the beginning. And I don't know if there is any key question at the moment in the chat, Becca, or if we are, if not, I can keep going.
No questions as yet, but I'll let you know.
Okay.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank you. So now we are going to keep talking more about like these different standards, because I don't know how familiar you are with all of them. So again, we were introducing the system of national accounts that it really get track of economic activity at a national level. And then we were introducing what is called the system of environmental economic accounting. That is, it includes the SEEA central framework and the SEEA ecosystem accounting. And the key things in between all of these frameworks is that they share concepts, definitions, boundaries, and what we could say accounting principles. And let me explain a little bit more what each of them measure. So from one side, we have, again, the system of national accounts that tracks all economic activities and wealth that to show how well an economy is performing. So the core elements that they include are production, consumption, accumulation, income, and wealth. And this one has been being used since the 50s. And this year, the update of the system of national accounts, it is being released. There is already like a new version that you can find online. And finally, it is including a connection to the other frameworks. But basically, the main issue with this framework, it was that it was not accounting for the depletion of, for example, fish stocks or environmental sustainability. So it lacks mechanisms to measure the degradation of natural resources or the environmental impacts of things like fishing activities. And that's why the statistic community, together with different academics and let's say like a lot of people were involved. in developing what is called the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, or SEEA. And SEEA provides a comprehensive and multi-purpose view of those relationships in between the economy and the environment. So then in 2012, the SEEA Central Framework was adopted by the UN Statistical Commission. And the SEEA Central Framework, it really helps measuring the environment and its relation with the economy. However, this framework still was not designed to accounting for ecosystem services or ecological capital. And I will explain those in more detail later on in the presentation. So then in 2021, the SEEA ecosystem accounting was released and adopted by the UN, at least the biophysical part. The idea is that each system or like framework complements each other. It's not to replace one or another. As we were saying, the different frameworks measure different parts of the whole equation, so they really complement each other. And the idea with the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, ecosystem accounting, is to analyze how ecosystems are doing and how people are using these ecosystems. So then we can see the benefits that people are getting from specific ecosystems. And to visualize this a little bit more, the main difference in between one and another is that the SEEA Central Framework, so the one here, it treats the environment as a party. So it measures the transactions in between environment and economy. And SEEA ecosystem accounting, it starts including ecosystem and the services they provide. So then we start having that ecosystems layer in the accounts. Because I lost the. Okay. So I don't know if there is any main question around the standards. If not, I want to start talking about those key accounting concepts that I was mentioning before, that all the standards they share.
We've got one question in the chat, Maria, from Arlene.
Yes.
She says, how does accounts take currency value into account, given the international framework? Is it dollar value established in a particular currency?
Okay, so normally this, it is done obviously like in the different countries. So normally it's like you just take into account, or like you use the currency of the country. And then obviously you can, if you want, you could compare internationally or in between countries, but each country would use their own currency. But it can be always translated. And that's why the standards are so important, because then you can always then compare. I don't know if that is answering the question.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Anthea's got another question. She says, are there overlaps between the two methods? If so, is there a preferred / suggested method?
I suppose with methods means the different accounting frameworks. So that's why the main overlap, we could say, it is that there are shared concepts. So then, for example, the System of National Accounts has classifications related to what we call economic units, that are like the units that operate in the economy. And because the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, or SEEA, follow the same standards and classifications, we can start doing comparisons, because we can get track of which services are going to which economic units. So then we can start linking. So it's rather than overlapping, linking. But it is true that the in between, we can say as well, in between the central framework and the ecosystem accounting, we might use the data, for example, let's say fish stock or fish catches in different ways in the different frameworks. And it is really important to follow the methods to avoid double counting. I hope this answers as well that question.
That's great. Thanks, Maria. Perfect.
Thank you. Okay. So now I'm going to speak about these key accounting concepts that are being shared in between the different frameworks. So there are three main ones that I want to talk about today, and these are stocks, flows, and supply and use. And I think the names are also very helpful for understanding what each one means. But basically, we have the three concepts across all the accounting standards, and they mean or they will calculate or reflect different things depending on what we are talking about. But basically, stocks are things that we have or exist in a specific moment on time. Flows are what happens or what is flowing during an accounting period or a time period. And then we would have the supply and use, that is where it is coming from and where it is going. So for that, I wanted to put the example of a glass of water. So for example, we can have the glass empty in a specific moment on time, and then in another moment of time, the glass is full. Then the glass empty and the glass full, and those 0 milliliters or the 250 milliliters of water are stocks. Then we would have the water flowing. That would be, for example, those 250 milliliters, because we open the tap and the tap is running for 30 seconds, for example. So that 250 milliliters coming into the glass would be the flow. And then the supply and use. So the tap is supplying the water to the glass. And I just wanted to put this very simple example to then go through what this would mean in economy, in environment, or in society. So for example, if we talk about the economy, stocks could be, for example, like buildings, machinery, or government debt in a specific moment on time, for example, at the end of the year. Or for example, it would be also how many hectares of forest or coral reef we have in a moment of time, but also how many oil reserves or fish stocks. And if we talk about society, it could be, for example, the number of hospitals by the end of the year or the population. So then when we talk about flows, it is what is happening during a period of time. Normally in accounting, many times what is used is a year or a natural year or a different type of, let's say, financial year. But you could have one of the economy examples would be wages paid during a whole year. If we talk about the environment, it could be, for example, emissions released to the environment in a specific year, or the carbon that is sequestered and stored annually. And for example, if we talk about society, it could be how much household childcare has been happening in 1 year, or how many students have been graduated in a specific year. And again, supply and use is where things come from and where they go. So in the economy could be factories produce cars and households buy those cars. In the environment could be forests provide timber and industries process the wood. And also in society, we could say, for example, that ocean provides fish, and as a use, communities use that fish for nutrition. So I think those concepts should be quite straightforward. I don't know if there is any question in the chat.
No questions in the chat at the moment. Maria, could you go back to the slide with the glass of water? Can you just go through it one more time? Is that all right?
Yes. So basically, again, the kind of like bridge in between the different accounting frameworks, we can say that we share key concepts. I think some of the three key concepts that is very useful to have clear in mind are these three, that is stocks, flows, supply and use, because it is really helpful to visualize also in the different frameworks. do you want me to go through the three of them, or you wanted to put an example about the social side or something?
Maybe just with the glass of water in terms of the stocks, flows, and supply and use.
Yes. So we can put the example at the beginning. I have my glass that is empty. So that could be, for example, that the, I don't want to use too many like accounting words, but it would be at the beginning of my accounting period, the empty is glass. The empty being the glass being empty and having 0 milliliters of water, that would be that my stock, it is 0 milliliters of water in the specific moment that is the beginning of my accounting period. Then I open the tab and I have a flow during 30 seconds. That could be the similar to something happening during a whole year in an accounting period, but my accounting period right now is 30 seconds. I open the tab for 30 seconds and 250 milliliters of water flow from the tab to my glass. So then when I close the tab, I have again a stock. In the moment I still have it open, it is still a flow. After 30 seconds, I close the tab, and that is my closing period. So at the end of my accounting period, my glass is full and it has 250 milliliters. If my glass at the beginning would have had 250 milliliters, at the end it would have been 500 milliliters, but my flow would still be the 250. I don't know if that make it more confused or more clear. And then the supply and use, it is to identify who is supplying, like where is my flow or water coming from, and who is using it. So who is the final beneficiary or user of that water. In this case, the supply, it is the tap, and the user is the glass. Is that
That's
more?
great, Maria. No, that's perfect. Thank you so much. That's brilliant.
Okay, so now let's start talking about the ocean accounts framework. So the idea is that those three main concepts, the stock, flows, and supply and use, are recorded in a standardized way for the three dimensions or domains that we are mentioning: environment, economy, and society. And you will see this diagram, maybe you haven't seen it really before. So this is a diagram I'm working on at the moment with many other people that are contributed to a paper. So that's why I have, please don't take any photo at the moment since this image is still under review. But the idea is to have a more clear visualization of the framework, because the previous diagram, we are revising it and trying to make it more clear and easy to digest, but hopefully this diagram will help. And I have here in the corner, you will see this. So even if we are separating the domains here in the diagram, it is important to take into account that economy is embedded in society, that is embedded in the environment. So these are the similar. But for representation, it is just easier to making it like this. So like that, we can start understanding which are the stocks and flows that happen in each of these domains, but also which are the flows in between the different domains. And that is what the ocean accounts framework intends to do. And that's why we have the technical guidance for ocean accounting that explains how we can do that for the different domains and how we can adapt the different frameworks for the ocean environment. So now what we are going to do is do a little trip in this diagram. So hopefully we can, by the end of the training, understand better what this means. So as we were mentioning before, we have some components or accounts that are the ones that are called environmental economic. So those that are related to environment and their connection to economy, but also society. So we would have what is called environmental assets, and those are related to the stocks of natural capital, flows to economy and society, but also flows to environment. As we were saying before, we have two main statistical frameworks that tell us how we can do this, following the standards, which classifications and which methodologies can be used. Then we would have the part around the economy. As we were saying before, we have the system of national accounts, and then how we translate this to the ocean environment. So how we can, again, account for the stocks and flows related to economy. And that's why we are mainly here today, we have the social side of things. And this is something that is not included in the other frameworks, and that's why GOAP and specifically the Social Accounts Working Group exist, because we are working in having those standards in a way that they are aligned with the other standards, and also in a way that it really encapsulates and visualizes what we need to measure. Because at the end of the day, the idea is that we start visualizing all of that information that is really key for managing or having the key indicators that will really inform policy and decision making in general. So let's start breaking this down a little bit. So we are going to start with the environmental economic side of things. We are going to start talking about the environmental assets. So what is in the environment and how that flows to economy. And for that, the SEEA ecosystem accounting is the one that gives us the guidances. So just to come back to the concept of natural capital. So natural capital includes the elements of nature that provide benefits to society and the economy. So that would be, for example, a mangrove ecosystem, a barrier reef, some tidal marshes, but also fish stocks, and so on. And from those elements of nature, humans get different benefits, what we call ecosystem services. So how the accounts account for it? We have two main components that are involved in the environmental assets and how to measure this. We have the extent, and like the word it says, it is the total area of the different ecosystem types and how those are changing in a different time. So again, we can think about that stocks and flows kind of concepts. So we have how much of the area we have in a specific point on time. And then when we compare to another point of time, we can start comparing how that is changing. And because we follow the same classifications and methodologies, this can be compared in a consistent way over time. Similarly, we have the condition layer. So the condition layer tells us how healthy that ecosystem is doing or how it is. And again, we can check how healthy the ecosystem was in a point of time, in a different point of time, and so on, and compare how they are changing. This will, the methodologies that are used for account for the different ecosystem types will depend on the ecosystem that we are talking about, and we will have different variables to account for them. And how this look like? So first we would have some maps that maybe you use Sentinel-2 and others, so some remote sensing at the beginning. Then we can classify which ecosystem types we are having in our map. And the more ground truthing data we can have to really validate if that is true, the better. And then this can be translated into tables. So we can start having how much coverage, for example, we have of the different ecosystems in a moment of time, and for multiple ecosystems at the same time. And why this is useful? Many times when we compare just maps, it's not that easy to see how everything is changing. And with the accounts, we can have start having different analysis, so we can identify changes in the distribution over time, and also how those changes are happening, which ecosystems, for example, were lost by which other ecosystems, and so on. I don't know if there is any question because I cannot see the chat.
Yes, there's one question. So how can the extent of a coral reef be measured when it's vertically tall but not horizontally wide?
Yeah, and so these are some of the issues that we face when we start doing the accounting, and that's why I was mentioning that it will depend which ecosystem we are accounting for the methodology, and that's why the ground truthing and different methodologies are so important, because then we may have the problem that is if you only rely in remote sensing, you may either classify something as a specific ecosystem and it is not true, or maybe you don't take into account either the 3D or the dynamics of different ecosystems. But these are things that are still an issue, and that's why the accounts always take into consideration or bring the protocols or standards for measuring these ecosystems that are already or existing through academia, or maybe existing through different monitoring standards that exist for specific reefs or ecosystems. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Maria. Chris just noted in the chat, coral reefs can be measured by volume 3D maps.
So if we don't have any other?
No more questions. There was a question about social accounts, but I've addressed it in the chat and I will mention it again later as well.
Okay, thank you, Becca. And thank you for the questions. So now that we were talking about like the key component of the environment, and that is kind of like just the environment by itself, now we are going to talk about the flows to economy. So that contributions that nature are doing to human activities in general. So not only economy, but also society. And those are normally called ecosystem services. And that's why, again, I want to bring the importance to standards and classifications. So the accounts follow the classifications from the SEEA ecosystem accounting. And SEEA divide the ecosystem services that we can get from environment in 3 main categories. So we would have provisioning. Those are the ones that are related to what we can extract or harvest from the ecosystems. So benefits that are related, for example, to food, like fish or wood or water. So those are benefits that we get from extraction or harvest of environment. We also have the benefits that are related to the ability of the ecosystem to regulate the biological processes and to influence climate. Those are called regulating ecosystem services. And these are things like climate regulation through carbon sequestration, for example, nutrient cycling or erosion prevention. So things also that are like coastal protection and so on. And here is when we start including things that go beyond the market. So here is really like that key aspect to go beyond the traditional economic benefits. And then we also have what is called cultural ecosystem services. But here I always like to clarify that it doesn't mean that accounts for all cultural values in a way that includes traditional values per se. So these services are more related to the benefits that we get from the experience that we have in nature. So for example, things that are related to how we perceive the quality of the ecosystems, or how we like there is that connection in the experience we have in nature. So they are things like recreation related services, so tourism related, but also beyond, also like the recreation we have in environment beyond tourism. Also educational, so for example, research that is done in nature, but also visual amenity. As we know, many times you would pay, or some things are more expensive, depending on if we have like a very nice view of the ocean, that if we are looking to a car park, for example. So those kind of things that at the moment are not reflected in national accounts start being reflected. So how this is done is through some logical steps, as we were saying before, so we can start connecting dots and track how some social or economic activities depend on a specific environmental assets or stocks. So for instance, if we start from a mangrove ecosystem or forest, we can start calculating how much protection is being provided by that mangrove. So how much erosion is being reduced through that protection. And finally, how many, for example, houses, resorts, businesses, etc., are being protected through this service that nature gives for free. And like that, we can calculate things like how much coastal protection rely on the habitat, and then if there is a change and changing that protection, how many properties, for example, would be impacted. So we can start really calculating and visualizing these dependencies. And just to put another example, we can also, for example, quantify how much of the catch rely on a specific habitat, and then if there would be a change, how many jobs, incomes are impacted. And later on, we will bring also to the table the social lens, but you can also start linking to other domains like the social. So for example, how much food relies in this ecosystem asset. And here you can see that these calculations can be done either in physical or in monetary. So we can do these connections either in physical or monetary. And I want to really highlight here that not always you need to go to the monetary valuation. So there is a lot of information coming from doing these connections in physical terms, and it's not always necessary, or you wouldn't need to go to the monetary valuation. And it's really important to think which type of decision you are going to make to then decide if you need to go to the valuation or not in monetary terms. And even though this is drawn as a linear connection, I also want to emphasize that there is no linear relationship in between the assets and the benefits. And what I mean with that is that the same mangrove forest is giving you many different ecosystem services and benefits. And again, the key, or like this nice thing that services bring to the table, is to go beyond traditional economy measures. So we can start including things like the reduced concentration in the environment or in the atmosphere, thanks to the different environmental assets that we have, or how much reduced sedimentation it is happening because of those mangrove forests or coral reef, but also how that affects maybe like the health of the environment affects physical and mental health and enjoyment. So again, this really helps us to visualize and account for dependencies that we have on nature. And it is really key to have in mind that there are many things that are not really replaceable by human-made things. So it is really important to have in mind that, for example, when we are going to the monetary valuation, because in the moment that you put a monetary value, you have that danger of thinking that you can't replace specific environmental assets by human-made assets, and this is not always the case. Most of the services cannot fully be replaced by human-made infrastructure. So just to sum up, around the SEEA ecosystem accounting framework, it goes beyond, for example, what we have been seeing until now in these systems of national accounts, because it combines both maps and accounting tables, and it brings that spatial diversity of services that we didn't have without including the extent and condition accounts. And maybe just to visualize how this could look like at the end. So you could have, for example, a map of a specific area or country, and then each of these grid cells can show how much, for example, a specific mangrove is given on carbon sequestration, fish nursery, or coastal protection. Other different cells that maybe represent coral can quantify how much fish nursery or coastal protection, and so on. So as we were saying before, it's not a linear connection. The same ecosystem can give different ecosystem services. And just to put also an example from one of the countries, this is an example from a pilot in Indonesia, and we can see here how by having the maps of 2 different years following same classifications and methodology, we can compare how the ecosystem extent and condition has been changing, and then quantify for example, the economic value, in some cases, economic loss due to the loss of specific ecosystem services, or just the trade-offs, even because of the changes of the ecosystems. I don't know if there is any question in the chat, Becca.
Yeah, there's a couple from Anthea. So the first question she had is, do you need to remove the value of human inputs when working out the dollar value?
Yes, that is actually a great question. So you have, we can say, 2 different type of ecosystem services. The ones that are related to the production boundary. So we could say the ones that normally go through a market transaction. In those, like she says, we need to remove the human inputs to then extract how much the ecosystem service or the ecosystem is providing as an input to then get the final benefit in this case, for example, in the economy. But there are others where there is no human input together, so then it would follow a different methodology. But yes.
Thanks, Maria. There's another one, which I might hand over to you and maybe I can touch on as well. This one's
Okay.
a challenging one. How do you report things like physical enjoyment, etc., if not in dollar value in the accounts? But Maria, maybe linked to the SNA and the well-being aspect that you've been reading up on.
So exactly, that's why there are different terms, right? How you can talk about this. So for instance, one way of reporting, if it is in physical, it could be the number of visits to a specific area. So for example, you could get track through different methodologies. There are some citizen science methodologies that can be used to account for the visitation to specific areas that are not related to tourism. But for example, that would be a way. And many times that can be related to, if there is, for example, a change in condition in an area, that could relate to people, for example, visiting it less, or maybe you could see like you can start linking those things. But you could do, for example, through the number of visitation. Back to you, Becca, if you wanted to add there as well.
No, that's a great answer, Maria. Thank you. Yeah, so I think you can do it in terms of resource use mapping. So looking at where people use and look at kind of what activities they're undertaking. But increasingly, there's a big focus on well-being in the SNA 2025. And that's something we're really trying to build into the social accounts side of things. So looking at, yeah, the number of hours, for example, they might spend doing these activities. So you could do a mixture of monetary and physical. And there's lots of activities that we'll need to talk about that, yeah, can potentially go into kind of the more social account side of things. But I think that was one of the challenges, is that if things weren't recreational tourism, they weren't captured. But yeah, I think we can do a kind of a mixture of physical and, yeah, monetary reporting on it. But yeah, oh yeah, Anthea, you definitely need to look at the SNA 2025. I think one way we've also been using it, and we've been putting it into kind of ChatGPT and Claude, and then that helps us to ask really particular questions of it rather than reading the whole thing cover to cover. That's been helpful.
Yeah, or looking for the keywords directly in the document, that also helps many times. But exactly, I think at the end of the day, it's also thinking what exactly you want to report from the, for example, recreation. If it is just the physical count of recreation, the methodologies would be more related to the SEEA, ecosystem accounting, for example. If you want to report how much visitation goes through economy, you would look more into the tourism related accounts in the economy side of things. But then if you want to look more into the well-being side of things related to recreation, it would be more looking into the social side of the framework. That exactly is what the focus is at the moment in having the standards and the right methodologies. Is there any other question?
No, that's everything at the moment.
Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to move to another of the, let's say, dimensions. So once we have the environment, there are flows going to the economy and society. Then we can look, for example, at the ocean economy. And as I was mentioning, this one is building on the, we can say, the oldest framework, that is the SNA. And as we were mentioning, Becca just said, there is the update that just happened this year. So these frameworks are normally and always under review. So they are updated after a certain amount of years. So in the case of the ocean economy, or well, in the case of the national accounts, they don't distinguish in between land and ocean. And there might be certain sectors of the economy that they are 100% ocean. We could say, like, for example, fisheries, ports, or shipping. But there are others that maybe some part it might be depending on the land, some part might be depending on the ocean. For example, for tourism, right? How much of the tourism of the country is coastal and marine, and how much it is terrestrial. And the same we could have for other sectors. So what the ocean accounts do, it is adapt the national accounts framework for the ocean. This is what many times is called satellite accounts, or ocean economy satellite accounts. That is when you do a little bit of a zoom into a specific area of your economy. One of the main issues that countries face is having a classification, or like which sectors should be included here, because there are many emerging sectors related to the ocean. So some countries may report differently, but to allow comparison, OECD has a list of ocean economic activities. Yeah, we are happy also if you have any questions to refer to specific documents. So feel free to reach out if you want to know more also about the specific documents, classifications, or guidance. But basically, with the ocean economy, what it is helpful and why you would or may be interested in doing is because you can start calculating or getting an idea of which portion of the national production is related to the ocean, or have like the economy disaggregated by marine activity. And then you can have also economic indicators for marine economy and by marine activity. So for example, here in the screen, you can see the marine sector total employment by marine activity. And that example is coming from the Statistics Canada, that they have the accounts published, but it also allows comparison. So you can compare, for example, the growth in the country's marine economy compared to the total growth of the country. So here we have also an example from the US and their marine economy satellite accounts. So again, this might be helpful for budget allocation or for specific policies that the countries may need to do and some decisions. And here I just wanted to basically highlight that, for example, it can be also helpful for tracking the size of the ocean economy for example, improved risk analysis. And if there is no question, maybe I just move to the next one. Is there any question Or this one, I
No.
think is the one more straightforward.
No questions as yet.
Okay. And now, as we know, until now we have done the journey in this diagram through first the environment and how the benefits that we get from the environment goes to economy, how the economy performs and how we can account for it. But as we know, a lot of or most of the economic and human activities in general, they also have an impact back to environment. So this is also captured in the standards or in the SEEA central framework specifically, and it is what we call flows to environment. And this one, as I was mentioning just now, it is related to the central framework. So as we were saying at the beginning, the central framework is non-spatial, but they are doing a review of the framework at the moment, so this may change. But the accounts that are related or relevant for calculating the flows back to environment from the central framework would be solid waste accounts and air emissions accounts. So start calculating and getting track of how much of the solid waste it is being released to environment and how much of the air emissions. And here I just wanted to put one example, and these are other sections of the central framework, but that are not or are not relevant for the flows to environment. So here I wanted to put an example from the ABS, Australian Bureau of Statistics. They released waste accounts in 2019, where they, for example, were calculating how much waste is generated by households or different industries. So they calculated how much of the plastics were generated, and then they assigned how much is going to landfill, how much is going to recycling, and how much is going to energy recovery. So the main idea with the ocean accounts is to start calculating how much is going to the environment as well, since this is a key piece for example, again, some policy or decision making at the national level, but also it may be done at a different level. So now we are going to move to the last part of the framework, that is the social side. So until now we have done the journey through the environment, how the environment give benefits to both the economy and society, how the economy and the flows within it can be measured, and then finally how economy and society may give flows back to environment. So now we are missing this final piece of the framework, and I'm going to pass the mic to Becca for this last part. And although I don't know if there is any question about the other side of things, and if not, I pass the mic to Becca.
There's one question, but I think we'll bring that to the end, but I've got it noted.
Okay.
So thanks, Maria. So with the social accounts, like Maria was saying, and we've been talking about in the chat as well, the social accounts, the social domain is the kind of section where there's like no standardization, there's no framework or guidance on how to do that. For your ecosystem and for your economic, there is guidance, but for social, we have a bit more flexibility. And developing this guidance through GOAP, through the working group, that will mean that the work we're doing is world leading. And we hope that obviously we'll be developing the guidance for the ocean, but we hope that it will be relevant for all the other ecosystems. So yeah, it's a really, really exciting work that we're doing. So in terms of social accounts, that's the process of capturing, analysing and reporting on data that relates to the kind of social, cultural and equity dimensions of the oceans. So we've kept it quite broad so we can incorporate lots of different diverse information within this. And for the social accounts to be really, really effective, we're making sure they've got a standardised format. So everything that Maria's been talking about with the SNA and the SEEA, we want to align with those frameworks to make sure that we've got acceptance and to make sure that the whole system and the kind of the connection between the ecosystem, the economic links really well with the social. So that's what we're really trying to do at the moment, is ensure there's that standardization and connection between them all. And that will make sure that, yeah, we have those kind of compatibility with those big statistical standards. So yeah, so the social accounts is really developing. Next slide, please, Maria. So I just put a few bullet points in terms of what we hope the social accounts will and what they'll do, what their role will be. So in terms of social accounts, we want to make sure that the information that's included in them can really help us to understand people's dependency on the ocean. And that's something that Maria's been talking about as well. So understanding people's use of the ocean and how dependent they are for it, for their livelihoods, for their income and for their food security, just as a few examples. Also, with the social accounts, you want to understand how kind of costs and benefits are distributed across the population. So if there's a particular change in a coral reef or a mangrove, or say if a policy intervention is put in place, how does that affect the community? Does it affect them all equally, or are there particular winners and losers as a result of those changes? And we want to understand how kind of different social conditions, so how communities are kind of made up, what's their composition, how that affects the ocean economy and how that affects ocean health. And also how kind of vice versa, how the ocean economy and ocean health can influence the social conditions within those communities as well. And there's also a governance lens to the social accounts as well. So thinking about the impact of management and governance on society. So in terms of kind of what social accounts aim to do, those are kind of the main points. Next slide, please, Maria. So the last few months, we've been really trying to work out how kind of social information can be fed into the accounting system. And Maria's been showing you those really excellent diagrams. So in terms of how social information can feed in, we really think there's kind of two entry points with the social accounts. So within kind of social accounts, we really think that one way in is the social conditions. So what are the conditions in that particular community? So we want to understand what is happening in that community in terms of maybe their social demographics, but also some of the factors and circumstances that impact quality of life. So we want to understand, for example, kind of food and nutrition security in that community, potentially resilience to environmental change, levels of poverty, but also levels of social inclusion in that community. So I think within the social conditions, you want to understand what's happening in that community, and then for how that might be affected by environmental change. And the social conditions can be captured kind of using quantitative and qualitative information. But that's what we're trying to do within the social conditions. And within the social conditions, we kind of see them more comparable to the ecosystem accounts. You know, Maria was talking about the extent and condition of mangroves and coral reefs. We kind of want to do the same for social conditions, seeing how communities might change over time. So does income, kind of average income change over time? The levels of poverty change year by year? We really want to study those kind of social conditions because they're really key to the whole system. Next slide, please, Maria. So this is one of the examples we've kind of been talking to a number of people with, and we always kind of draw on the Maldives example. But for social conditions, what we could do is we could have a map like you can kind of see here. This is an example from the Maldives. So what you could do, for example, is you can kind of put census block information. So using government data, you can kind of put census blocks onto the maps. And then what you can do is, if you're looking at resilience, for example, what you could do is you could look at kind of the amount of the coastline that is potentially protected or unprotected. And then you overlay your information on top around your social conditions. So that could be poverty, that could be socio-demographics. And by bringing that information together, you can really help to understand kind of how populations might be affected. For example, if there's flooding or other environmental change incidents. And by combining that information together, you're much more likely to be able to design appropriate mitigation and disaster management measures as well. So kind of bringing that kind of map together, bringing that information on levels of protection and bringing that together with your social conditions can give you, that greater amount of information and know what to do with the social information. Next slide, please, Maria. Oh, that's your slide, Maria. There you go.
Sorry, too many screens for looking for unmute. But basically within the social domain or the social lens or dimensions, we also have governance. So that is how, for example, we can think society does like arrangements for governance in this case. So it really refers to the ways in which individuals and institutions manage their common affairs. And we have different types, right? Like we have norms, institutions, relationships of authority or cooperation, for example, that may influence different levels, and also spatial boundaries that we could talk, for example, about local, national, regional, global, etc. And the idea with the governance lens within the ocean accounts, it would be to have this, let's say, as another layer in the accounts, as we were saying, and maybe I haven't put enough, maybe like highlighting, is that the ocean accounts really want to bring that spatial or spatially explicit layer to all of the information. So the idea would be to have governance as another layer. And again, as I was showing you before, those grids where each cells give you some information around extent, condition, the ecosystem services that are provided. It also can have information around economic information, social information, or in this case, also governance. So which rules or maybe like instruments are in place. So like that, you can also get better track of the policy effectiveness, for example, of different things. So back to you, Becca, for the social activities.
Thanks, Maria. Yeah, so kind of hopefully you can see the key entry point. The first one is the social conditions, and under that come under all the kind of governance conditions as well. For a while, kind of governance was kind of separate to the social accounts, but there was so much crossover that we made the decision to kind of bring it all together. So yeah, those kind of social conditions consider the governance layers as well, bringing that all into the home of social accounts. So the second entry point is social activities. So we know that people kind of interact with the environment, and that people kind of create social value beyond just those kind of economic transactions measured with a dollar sign. And there's like a whole web of different human activities and relationships in the ocean environment. So the social activities we're really measuring within the social accounts, and they go beyond the SNA. So Maria was talking about the SNA and all the kind of economic activities that are considered under that framework. We really want to build on that. And we really want to look at the kind of activities that happen that are not related to economic transactions, but are still important to the ocean economy. Next slide, please. So we know there's so many social activities that are really important to the ocean economy, which are currently invisible because they don't have economic transactions. So within the social accounts, we really want to prioritize those activities that are currently invisible. Next slide, please, Maria. So there's lots of different kind of social activities that we could consider. And I think this might be another session we run, maybe a follow-up in terms of what can be measured under the kind of two key entry points. But just for this particular presentation, I just kind of gave an example. So you've got the activities, the economic activities that are considered under the SNA. Those are ones associated with economic transactions. And those are said to be like within the production boundary because they have economic kind of transactions related to them. They've kind of got a market value. So for example, like subsistence fishing, that falls within the production boundary because it's associated with economic transactions. Even if you're catching the fish for your own consumption, that's considered within the production boundary. But when you think about outside of the production boundary, there's always other kind of social activities related to subsistence fishing, which isn't currently captured within the SNA. And that's what we really want to bring into the social accounts. So if someone's kind of catching fish for their own household consumption, there's always other activities. For example, when they bring it to their household, they have to do food preparation and processing. So they have to kind of do that level of activity to get it ready for consumption. If a fisher is kind of going offshore, kind of who's looking after kids, who's looking after elders and kind of other members of the family. So again, there's that level of kind of unpaid household labour that's happening just for a fisher to go offshore to catch fish. There might be other activities around kind of maintaining the coastal property or particular equipment that's being used for fishing. For example, there might be like boat and net repair that needs to happen to allow for these kind of subsistence activities. So just kind of from this diagram, just to highlight, there's all these social activities that aren't being captured currently, and they're all the ones that we want to bring into the social accounts. So at the moment, we've been trying to work out kind of what falls inside the production boundary and what falls outside. It's been a bit complex, but we're currently developing guidance on that. But that's just to show you the kinds of activities we think should come into the social accounts. Next slide, please. And yeah, I think hopefully from the presentation today, you can kind of see, like, with the addition of the kind of social domain at the like I've been talking about, it kind of connects it up through the whole system. So with the kind of ecosystem accounts, you can look at coral bleaching and see the impacts on the environment. So that might change kind of fish abundance, for example. Then with your economic accounts, you can very much see how that might affect the dollar sign, so how that might affect the reef fishery and the jobs that are provided. And then hopefully you can see with the social side of things, adding that kind of social domain on, that shows you kind of how we can study, for example, food security. So how might food security be affected by coral bleaching? And bringing all that information that we have through ocean accounts, that can lead us to like being able to produce better management measures and policy to kind of address those issues like coral bleaching and how that might affect society. So just to show you the kind of flow and how all this information kind of comes together. Next slide, please, Maria. And just to briefly say as well, within the kind of social account side of things, we've currently got 4 pilots, which we'll be working on until March next year. And this is all led by people in country. So we've got various partners that are delivering this work. So we've got pilots in the Maldives, in Mozambique, Belize and Costa Rica. And there'll be follow-up sessions kind of drawing on the expertise and the experiences of subcontractors that are delivering these pilots in country. But just to note that a lot of the ideas we've talked about in terms of the social domain, that's very much been explored within these pilots. Next slide, please. And yeah, so just a quick plug as well. If you're not part of the social accounts working group, we'd love for you to join. So we have over 100 individuals from across the world working in a range of different sectors. And yeah, anyone can join. The kind of, it's just bringing together people with a common interest in kind of ensuring that social, cultural and equity information is included within ocean accounts, but also decision making more broadly. Next slide, please, Maria. And yeah, so the kind of next few months, the social accounts working group and a broader group will be developing the technical guidance around social accounts. So there's the 2025 to 2026 update on the ocean accounts technical guidance. So it's not been updated since 2021. So there'll be various different kind of chapters or circulars as part of the technical guidance, which will be really helpful for everyone. And there'll be a new kind of chapter within the technical guidance that will focus on the social accounts. And that social accounts chapter will be essential again because of how new it is. So yeah, we'd love everyone to be involved in kind of shaping that guidance. And there's so much high demand from across countries across the world who are really interested in the social accounts and want to know how to develop it in practice. So we'll be drawing on the pilots that we're doing and also all the work of the social accounts working group. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of the social side of the accounts. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you, Becca. And maybe I was having like just 2 other slides, but maybe I just want to emphasize as well, because I think I didn't mention before, the level or the scale that you can do the accounts. It really depends on the area you are focusing on. Here we have been mentioning mainly national or kind of like that kind of public or, yeah, again, national level. But the idea is that because you follow standards and methodologies, depending on the scale you are looking at, maybe local, maybe a project scale, maybe regional, this type of information can be adapted to the location or the scale that you are deciding or like doing any type of informed decision about. And here, I think it's better maybe to have the last minutes for questions, but I just wanted to say that there are many questions that can be basically answered by the different components or the different accounts that are included in the ocean accounts framework, but also the, let's say, like the great thing of the accounts and linking everything together is that you can also start answering things that are connected. So for example, how blue is our blue economy? So how sustainable it is, how to maximize ecological and economic value of MPAs, but also how is the cost of degradation or the return on conservation. So that idea of kind of looking at the whole picture and making this kind of holistic view again. So looking at your environment as a whole system in between environment, society, and economy rather than in silos. And then maybe just have some time for questions.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Maria. That's brilliant. I wish I'd attended it last year when I joined. It was excellent. Any questions at all from Maria or myself? Yeah, please raise your hand and we can unmute you or post the question in the chat. I think there was one question from Arlene. Maybe we'll get started with that one. How does this apply across domestic and international waters in terms of ocean accounts?
That is a great question. So that come back a little bit to the link I was saying to the scale. So when you are doing any type of accounting exercise, the things that you need to kind of decide at the beginning is the scope in terms of spatial and also in terms of accounting period, like how much time are you comparing, right? Like is it annually or so on? And ideally, if different parts of a region are doing the exercise, then this can be brought together and can be also a regional one. And ideally, this also would help when looking into beyond economic EEZ, like exclusive economic zone, sorry. But it also have like the offshore side or the offshore environments are really hard to account properly because of the 3D or like the water column. So the methodologies in place for looking into extent and condition are still a bit hard, but the rest of accounts could be kind of like still done in those areas.
That's great. Thanks, Maria. I guess I had a question. So I know you've been working on a paper about this recently, but I was going to say, like, kind of what's the status of ocean accounts kind of around the world at the moment?
So there are a few things. As I was mentioning, there is a lot of global momentum in the side of policy. So we can see that countries really have more and more demand on starting the accounting, from moving from the, let's say, the desire to really the implementation. It has been more like slowly growing. But at the moment, we have identified more than 50 countries that have implemented some type of ocean account, and this has had an increasing. We can see that it has increased a lot since the 2018 to at the moment. So we can see that there is a lot of interest, and also in the UNOC 3 that was in June of this year, we also saw that I think it was 19 countries and 7 organizations signed the pledge to join the ocean accounts or like to advance ocean accounts in their country by 2030, because they can really see how this really help in, for example, reporting for different international agreements and so on. So we can see that there is a lot of interest and increasing implementation.
Thanks, Maria. I've got another one. I don't know if this is harder, but in terms of kind of developing ocean accounts, like where do countries start if they kind of are interested in doing an ocean account or have like a commitment to doing an ocean account? Where kind of, how does it kind of start? Where do people start at and how do they get guided through the process?
So in the GOAP website, we have what is called the diagnostic tool. So ideally, you would start with a scoping, which are the priorities, or in this case, which are the decisions you want to get the information for deciding on. So, for example, if you have a priority in reducing waste or looking into blue economy, or, for example, some conservation targets, you might decide going for different type of accounts. And we always, or what we have seen, it works. It is starting in a pilot or a smaller scale, look into the methodologies that work and can be applied into your context, and then start moving forward or increasing the scale if that is what you have interest on. But it's better to first decide based on what you want to get the information for.
That's great, Maria. Oh, I've got one more question for you. I was going to ask, in terms of the social accounts working group and making sure that the social side kind of matches the economic and environmental, are there any kind of brief tips you'd give us as a social accounts working group?
I think it would be maybe looking at some of the classifications that are being used for the other frameworks, since reading maybe the whole framework, it is very heavy. So maybe just looking into so classifications that are used in your context for the economy, for instance, or for example, which are the ecosystem services that are happening in that area. And you can again look into the different ecosystem services classifications. And maybe through that you can do those connections. I think that might be like a nice, a more digestible way to start. Not easy.
That's great. Thank you so much, Maria. I was just going to post these QR codes as well on the slides, but I will send them out on email as well. But we've got a feedback survey, and we would love it if you guys could, provide us some insights into kind of what was good or bad about this training and how we can improve it in the future. So yeah, would love it if you could fill in the feedback survey. And then if you are interested in the social accounts working group and you aren't currently part of this, we'd love it if you could join. And there's a Google form for that as well. But yeah, just to kind of finish the session, thank you so much for participating today, and hopefully you found it useful and informative, and the Q&A discussion was helpful as well. So we just kind of hope this is the beginning of your ocean accounting journey. Like we said, we're going to be launching the ocean accounting kind of online education series in October this year through Google Classroom. So hopefully that will come up very soon, and hopefully you'll be engaging with that. And for those who couldn't join us today or would like to share this content with colleagues, we'll send out the recording and the slides. But we're also running an identical session tomorrow for the Atlantic time zone as well. And just to finish, thank you so much, Maria, for delivering such an excellent session. And thanks for everyone's engaging and thoughtful sessions, questions. And if you've got any kind of follow-up questions for us or need any resources, feel free to reach out to us. You can send us an email, myself and Maria. And thank you so much for joining, and we hope you'll have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to engaging with you in the future. Thank you so much. Thank you.